warm welcome to you. You're listening to The Music Business Buddy with me, Jonny Amos, podcasting out of Birmingham in England. I'm the author of the book, The Music Business for Music Creators, available in hardback, paperback, ebook format. I'm a music creator with credits on a variety of major and indie labels as a writer-producer. I'm a senior lecturer in both music creation and music business. Wherever you are, whatever you do, consider yourself welcome to this podcast and to a part of the community. I'm here to try and educate and inspire music creators from all over the world in their quest to achieving their goals by gaining a greater understanding of the business of music. Okay, so this week what I'm going to be doing is taking an analytical and objective viewpoint as to the state of the music industry. One of the things that I try and do in order to try and be as useful and resourceful to you as possible is to try and read a lot of different things that will inform me on stuff that I can then break down and share with you. So, for example, I read a lot of things like stats and industry newsletters and research reports and all sorts of things that will give me a little bit of an indication as to where things might be going, and then so that you don't have to kind of go through all that, I try and kind of chew it up and share it for you in a more succinct manner. So that's the aim of today as well. Now, the source I'm using for today is Chartmetrics. Now, if anybody is not familiar with Chartmetrics, it's basically a music analytics solution, right, which kind of basically helps digital marketeers, music supervisors, artist managers, record companies and stuff monitor the performance of recording artists, you know, so they look for kind of key performance indicators on albums and demographics and that kind of thing. It is used by Universal Music Group and Live Nation, Netflix, all sorts of different industry partners, but anyone can subscribe to it. Now, one of the many things that they do that I find really interesting is how they use AI. So they use it in a way that's similar to many industry platforms, which is to use it in a predictive manner to predict growth on trends and artists and, you know, kind of who's coming through, what are they doing, why is it they're doing it that way, and what's working. So some of that kind of stuff will be used in order to analyze some of the performances of the music industry over the last year, let's say. So let's get into it. Let's have a look at the state of the industry. Here we go. Okay, so what I'm doing here is going to draw some commentary on the Year in Music report by Chartmetrics. This is only the second year they've done this, by the way, but they do an extremely good report. So they track around 11 million artists, and there's a lot of different things that I could pick apart. But the first thing that kind of just leapt out to me is the number of solo artists there are currently in the world. So if we just split between solo acts and group acts, and this is kind of globally, right? There's everything that's under their radar. 34% of the acts in the world under their 11 million radar are groups, and that could be a group of, you know, two or more people, right? So duo or more. So that means that 66% of the artists that they track are solo artists. That's a lot, isn't it? I mean, that did surprise me a little bit, but then that does seem to kind of fall in line with a lot of the things that we see. One of the things also that they did, they put a highlight on Chapel Roan. Now, if you think about this, right, so if we go back to January 2024, right, so Chapel Roan was categorised as like a mid-level artist with Chartmetrics, with a score of what they put down as 77.5. 11 months after that, her score peaked at 97.6. That's by November 2024. So that places her within the top 1% of artists that are tracked within their algorithm. That's an idea of kind of growth, you know, and there's all sorts of things that have kind of contributed to that. Obviously, the streaming data, appearances at things like Coachella, NPR Tiny Desk, that kind of thing. There's kind of no surprise in terms of like the sort of the top 10 artists of the world. Bruno Mars, Billie Eilish, Taylor Swift, Drake, Lady Gaga, Justin Bieber, The Weeknd, Eminem. These are the kind of artists that would be globally top 10 that still are under that radar. Now, something interesting as well that I saw was that 13% of the top 500 artists in the world tracked by Chartmetrics were ranked as Latin artists. So the highest rank was Karol G, who peaked at number 13. And it's been a very, very good year for a lot of Latin artists, particularly out of Colombia. Now, one of the things that we hear about is, how many songs are released through distributors onto the likes of Apple, Spotify, Amazon, etc. every single day. And it's a number that kind of just swashes itself through social media and kind of scares a lot of people. But the exact stat on Chartmetric here is 28.7 thousand tracks released daily. 28.7 thousand tracks. Okay, so one of the highlights that stood out to me was in regards to Charli XCX's album, Brat. Now, that was a pretty kind of defining cultural moment, especially in regards to how data is looked at, because it kind of extended her influence beyond just like the music itself. So if we look at that album, so it had 84 million global streams in its first week, but 5 months after that initial burst of release streams, the compilation of the album's remixes came out. But that album of remixes brought in over a dozen artists across various different career stages. So the track Guess, for example, featuring Billie Eilish, gathered something around 38 million streams in the first week, which then drove Charli XCX's monthly listeners up from 24 million up to 46 million in just a month. Now, track duration is another thing of interest, because if we just take our minds back to kind of 2020, 2021, during the pandemic and the peak of kind of perhaps TikTok influence on music, we started to see a lot of songs shrink down in structure and form. So we saw things like intros and outros disappearing, bridges, middle eights going out of fashion, etc. What we're starting to see now is an increase again in longer songs becoming more popular again. So while the tracks on Spotify charts kind of did have quite a wide range of durations, Chartmetrics is saying that they most likely were between 251 and 309 in terms of the very, very top echelon tracks. So the shortest track was Clip 1 by South African rapper A. Reese. It's also been a very, very big year for female pop artists. So if we take a look at someone like Sabrina Carpenter, so as of January the 1st last year, that's 2024, the singer had 35 million Spotify listeners per month, right? So, and that is a number that then peaked later in the year at 86.9 million in October. So a huge year of growth there. Okay, now one of the things I always like to look at is genre and genre definition. I talk about this quite a lot, especially when it comes to metadata, track visibility, distributors, how people categorize things, also how artists categorize things, how distributors categorize things, that can be different, and then how the DSPs categorize things, because sometimes we see Apple and Spotify, for example, categorizing things quite differently. One of the things that we might start to see, I think, in the next year or two are way more genre categories, especially in regards to secondary genres that fall inside of a larger primary genre group. So, Chartmetric actually tracked a total of, get this, 1,691 genres. That's a lot of genres. No surprise to see that kind of hip hop and rap was still number one. Also, especially when you think about its influence on how pop records still sound in the 2020s. Dance, number 2, pop at 3, alternative at 4. Alternative is it covers so many different things, isn't it? 5 was classical, 6 was electro, 7 indie, 8 soundtrack, 9 ambient, and 10 rock. So what we're seeing there is a kind of link between, we talked about earlier about the number of solo artists versus number of groups. We know that we're in a kind of in ratio a very, very low number of groups these days. So we see rock at 10 there. That kind of makes sense. It adds up, right? Now, there's also a highlight in the report on K-pop. If anybody that doesn't know, generally South Korea is usually around 7th or 8th biggest market in the world. It has been there for about 7 or 8 years now and continues to stay around there in the kind of global charts. But it is so different from so many other genres. So, for instance, the sales are very physical. There's a lot of CD, DVD sales. It does export very well to the Western world. But Spotify, it's just not as much as a part of how that music is consumed. So, for example, K-pop stats look around about 25% TikTok, 25% Instagram in terms of engagement, and then YouTube and Spotify kind of make up the rest as the market leaders with around 15 to 20% each, which is quite different, right, from a lot of other genres that we might look at, especially some of the more mainstream genres like pop and hip-hop. Okay, so in terms of the market leaders in the audio streaming market, it's no surprise to see Spotify at number one. 61.4 billion listeners and 23.4 billion followers. So I think that's going to grow next year, especially as we start to see more premium listeners on Spotify in South America and India. Spotify, so, it's number one there. Of the 11 million Spotify profiles tracked on Chartmetrics, only 1.58 million, that's 14%, have more than 10 listeners from month to month, emphasizing just how much the platform is utilized by undiscovered artists. So from that 1.58 million, 37% have more than 1,000 monthly listeners. So that gives us an idea when we go back to how many tracks are released daily. Sometimes I hear artists kind of feel a little bit down about that, and I say, don't worry, there's a lot of music out there that perhaps is not as competitive as what you make. The fact that you're even listening to this right now kind of puts you into the game. It tells you that you are into this, that you are trying to commit to it. Most people don't always think like that, right? It's good to look around and see what we can learn from everything else that's going on around us. Today's radio ecosystem is also has some stats in here. So Chartmetrics currently tracks 2,860 radio stations across the world, that is. A total of 2 million tracks were played for a combined 1 billion spins on the radio. Top artists on the radio: David Guetta, Chris Brown, Taylor Swift, Dua Lipa, Morgan Wallen, Post Malone, Sabrina Carpenter, The Weeknd, Teddy Swims and Ed Sheeran. So it's slightly different there, right? Slightly different from the top streamed artists. There's some correlation, but it doesn't always seem to add up. YouTube, of course, you can't not mention YouTube on this, right? It's a cornerstone in the music industry. So it serves, as we know, as both a discovery platform and also a revenue driver for artists and labels. So across the 11 million artists tracked in their system, 6.7 million videos were posted over the course of 2024. 6.7 million videos posted. Wow. So that covers everything from music videos to lyric videos, BTS videos, social media shares. I wonder if it includes short form content. I don't know. I should imagine it probably does. Now, YouTube's stats are more global than Spotify's because they will have a higher usage of people around the world. So if we were to look at their charts, if you like, not that many people often look at this, but I find it very interesting because it reads very differently than how Spotify does, due to the higher user bases in countries, in territories like Asia and Latin America, and a higher prevalence of Latin music spends time on the YouTube charts. So the charts do look very, very different on YouTube. Now, there's an interesting thought here around music videos. So music videos that were once such an important part of artist promotion and also, of course, fan engagement, are undergoing a shift in relevance. So in a landscape dominated by short form content, modern videos are often overshadowed by the success of their audio counterparts on platforms like Spotify. Very interesting. So, for instance, in 2023, they say 36 of the top 40 most streamed Spotify tracks had accompanying videos, but the gap between streams and YouTube views averaged 731 million. So that trend highlights the declining role of music videos as a primary touch point for fans. All right, so a quick touch on the audio demographics of social media platforms. So just real quick scan on this. So TikTok, 61% female users. Instagram, 56% female users. YouTube, 45% female users. Now that the 18 to 24 bracket is bigger on TikTok than it is anywhere else. It's also the biggest kind of area on YouTube too, and Instagram is largely bigger with people between the ages of 25 to 34. I'm really skimming through this, by the way. I'm missing out a lot of stuff, but that is interesting. It does tell us something. Okay, and then finally, in regards to audience location, so it's no surprise to see that the United States are at number 1. Brazil are at number 2. This is both on TikTok and Instagram, by the way, and YouTube. On TikTok, Mexico is number 3, followed by United Kingdom in 4th. Instagram, India is 3rd, followed by Indonesia in 4th. The UK sitting 6th on Instagram. And on YouTube, India again in 3rd, much like Instagram, with Mexico in 4th, Indonesia in 5th, and the UK at number 7. Okay, so one of the things that I absolutely love about this particular report is the way that the career stages of artists are actually documented. So again, 11 million artists, right, that are registered through the Chartmetrics system. So, and many of those artists experience a shift in their career stage during 2024. So the majority of artists today remain in the undiscovered and developing categories, right? However, what 2024 saw over 2023 was a larger number of artists achieving what they consider to be mainstream status. However, let's put some stats on it. So there were, out of 11 million artists, 2.8 thousand artists achieved mainstream status, while another 308 artists reached superstar level. Now, as useful as it might be to kind of look, and it is, right, to look at the very, very top upper echelon. This is why I study the Hot 100, because if something's successful in America, it's going to influence so many other countries around the world, probably 60 or 70 countries at minimum. Now, it's not the be-all and end-all, especially if you don't listen to pop music, and I don't listen to pop music every single week. But that does tell us something about global influence. But one of the things that I love is looking at the kind of the artists that sit under the radar of those kind of, you know, the legendary artists, or, you know, the superstar artists, or the mainstream artists, etc. I like to look at some of the other levels as well. So out of those 11 million, so 818,000. That's the number of undiscovered artists that started to appear in the year of 2024. That's under the tracking system that Chartmetric use, which is very rigorous. So the majority of artists entered Chartmetric as undiscovered, as they are, you know, new to the music scene with, you know, only a few available metrics, right, for tracking across platforms. There is an increase of 61.5k in the developing artist bracket, and that's a number that's much higher than 2023. So developing artists are slightly more connected than those in the undiscovered category, many in that tier of kind of, you know, taking the first steps in establishing their presence across DSPs, across social platforms, and that's also web presence, you know, for NLP and web scraping, blog features, live reviews, that kind of thing, all contribute. And then also an 8.5k increase in mid-level artists. So that's the proportion of artists reaching the mid-level tier, and that's significantly lower than the two previous levels that we've just looked at there. So for an artist to be considered mid-level, they must show significant consistency in audience and engagement growth, a sometimes difficult feat, right? Now, I would love to know a little bit more about how those stats are pulled, but I should imagine that what they're looking at there is a graph analysis of continued growth. Now, of course, we know that in the streaming world, that's truly only fed through continuous releases. So it might be that markers like that come up and come back down again, dependent upon the seasonality of the artist, how often they're releasing music. But of course, we know as well that the artists that go through periods of time where they're not releasing as much music, those ones that aren't doing that but keep up with their social media on a kind of brand marketing level rather than a kind of campaign marketing approach, when they only post when they release music, you know, the brand marketing approach is much more effective because it keeps engagement up, which I would guess triggers this algorithm. Anyway, a few little snapshots there, a few little highlights. I hope it's been useful in some way or another. I will catch you again next time. May the force be with you.